Hello, Shrij.
Hi, Claire.
Thank you so much for agreeing to chat today just about your journey, what happened to you, how you recovered, your journey back to health, and maybe a little bit of advice for the people who found themselves in a similar position.
Mhm,
Because I think, we were just talking earlier about how privileged we feel to be able to share the knowledge of how we recovered with other people.
mhm.
Because there is a way back to health. It's just so many doctors don't know it because it's not in the medical textbooks yet, but
Mhm,
it will be.
mhm.
There's so much research going on into this that ultimately it will be better understood and we will all be helped in a different way. So,
Yes,
meanwhile, it's kind of us, this kind of, well, we're not the only voice, but there's a lot of voices out there like us saying there is a way out
yes,
and helping people, give people the knowledge and guide them out. So, if
fantastic.
you could just tell me a little bit about you. I know you live in West London.
Yes. So I live in West London. I am originally from India, the northeast side of India, and I moved to London about, well, almost 20 years ago. So I think I can call this as my home now.
Wonderful.
And I've got a 7-year-old daughter who keeps me busy.
Ah,
And yeah, so it's been great to connect with the mind body community because of obviously of the illness that I had a
yeah,
couple of years ago. So
cool. So what were you diagnosed with and how long did you have those symptoms for?
yeah, so it all started in 2022 when I caught COVID. I wasn't too poorly with COVID. I just had a couple of weeks of, flu, mild flu. I
Mhm.
had fever for a couple of days and a little bit of body aches. It wasn't really, really something that was quite intense, very mild, like a cold and flu.
Mhm.
Um, and then I recovered after 2 weeks, which I thought I'd recovered because I felt good. I went back to work, went back to life, and I think it was about 6 weeks later. So I caught COVID in April 2022. So 6 weeks later, about sometime around mid-May or end of May, I started feeling unwell again, very flu-like again. And
Mhm.
I thought I might have just caught another virus because my daughter goes to school and she comes back with all viruses
Yeah.
all the time. So I was like, oh, I've just had COVID. It can't be COVID. So I think I've got another bug again. But then, it lasted for a while. I just couldn't shake it off. I was just unwell. And 2 weeks turned to 3, 3 weeks turned to 4, and the doctors kept saying, "No, I think you just got a virus. You'll be fine. You'll be fine." And when it didn't happen, then we started talking about, well, could this be post-viral, as in could this be long COVID?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah,
So
thank you. Thank you. Because I should say this is the first time we've met. So I didn't actually work with you. You worked with my amazing colleague, Alice
yes,
Bowley.
yes, yes.
So yeah, so ultimately were you diagnosed with long COVID? Was that the conclusion or
It was a conclusion, and because obviously, it was coming down to June now. I was still quite unwell. I couldn't. It wasn't. It wasn't like I wasn't functional. I was functional, but when you're not feeling 100%, you feel like you're waking up every day. You're so run down, and so that happened in the first 4 weeks after I was diagnosed with post-viral or long COVID, and and then, but then it started getting worse. I started getting
mm,
worse. And
mm,
after about a couple of months since I started feeling unwell with long COVID, my body sort of just crashed. I then started becoming, I couldn't become functional after that. I was actually homebound, most of the time
mm,
bedbound,
mm,
where, I started feeling tired. There was a lot of fatigue, exhaustion. Then I started having, gut issues, just feeling so wired throughout the day, like not
yeah,
restful. And then I wasn't sleeping very well at night. Well, I couldn't sleep. My knees started feeling very weak, my legs, so I couldn't even like stand for more than a couple of minutes at my worst point.
mm,
Ringing ears, just headaches constantly. And all of that started happening, just like I said to you, like about, 4 weeks after being
mm,
diagnosed with long COVID. So basically, it got from bad to worse, my situation,
yeah, yeah,
when I thought I would heal, but no, it was the other. I was just
mm,
getting worse and worse, to the point that I had to take time off work. I couldn't do childcare. I had to be looked after, and I had to be very dependent on others.
Mm. No, it's a horrendous experience, isn't it? It's such a shock. You don't think like that anything like that could ever happen to you.
Yeah.
And did you try kind of what did the doctor suggest you do? Like, was it medication? Was it rest? What were they saying?
Yeah, so basically, it wasn't a big help. What was quite reassuring was I went to see a lot of doctors, and I was put through a lot of tests. So for example, they took a lot of my bloods to check that my iron levels were okay, my hormones were okay, and thyroid and the rest of
Mhm.
it. And because of my ringing ears and headaches, I went to a neurologist who booked me in for MRIs. And, at that time, it was mixed feeling because when all those results came back normal. So in
Yes.
a way, it was reassuring that there's nothing wrong with me. But in the other way, it was, if there's nothing wrong, then why am I feeling so unwell?
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
frustrating. So it was very mixed at that time, and I was so confused. I
Yeah.
was like, what's going on to my body? The doctors are saying you're okay. This might be just post-viral, but you'll be okay just give your body some time to heal because you've been hit by a nasty virus, COVID, and this is
Mhm.
happening. But obviously there's nothing we can do. There's no medication. What we can do is give you medication to just help you manage the symptoms, but there's no cure, there's no fix.
Mhm, mhm. What a heart-sink thing to be told. I mean, as you say, this is such a familiar journey for me. I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I was diagnosed with something post-viral as well. But it went on for 15 years until I
Wow.
discovered mind-body stuff, the mind-body knowledge. But I mean, almost everyone I've worked with has got the same story.
Yes.
And in the end, you start to think yourself, am I hypochondriac? Could I be?
Yes.
I don't think I
Yes.
am. But how come I've got all these symptoms and all the tests come back, everything's relatively normal? Um,
Yes.
so then did you start looking for kind of other ways outside of what we would call conventional medicine? Did you start looking at other
Yes.
solutions?
Then I started, obviously, I joined long COVID Facebook groups just to kind of get a sense because I was doing loads of research trying to, find a fix for myself now that the doctors were saying, give yourself some time, your body will heal on its own, right? But as humans, we want a quick fix because
Mhm.
obviously at this point in time, I had a child to look after,
Yeah.
work to do. I couldn't be homebound, bedbound, completely taking time off
Mhm.
work, and just rely on others to help support my daughter and help support me. Basically, it wasn't going to work like that. So I was like, what else
Yeah.
can I do to help myself better? To make myself better. So we joined long COVID Facebook groups, which was knowledgeable in that sense. It gave me so much um, incredible knowledge as to how others are facing the same thing as well. But obviously, with a myriad of symptoms, it was quite varied across different people. But through the Facebook group, I also found out what other preventative measures people are taking to help. So there was osteopathy, which I did try as well.
Mhm.
So I did a handful of sessions with osteopathy, but obviously it had no effect on me at all. Then I
Yeah.
tried homeopathy as well. I got myself some pills from the homeopathic doctor. I tried about a couple of weeks, but no change because in fact it made me feel worse, I think. That's how I felt,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, so through the Facebook community, the long COVID community, I did try a few other things. Well, at this point, I was so desperate to find a cure
Mhm.
anyway, and that's how I stumbled upon MBR on one of those groups.
Oh, cool. So the Mind Body Reconnect.
Yes,
Yeah, so cool. So you reached out and you got a therapist who's Alice, you
yes.
mentioned.
So
Yeah,
So I was
yeah.
quite lucky in the sense there were a few people talking about it, about Mind Body Reconnect on the group on Facebook. And I was right. And I started looking into Mind Body and I was like, maybe this may work. Because I was so desperate at the point. I
Yeah.
was like, I was willing to do anything and try out
Mhm.
anything. But also because there were some recovery stories over there on the Facebook group about Mind Body Reconnect that made me go, wow, like if people are feeling so much better just by understanding or knowing and getting knowledge about mind body connection, I mean, why not? And it seemed, it may
Yeah.
work, it may not work for me. Let's give it a shot. So I
Uh-huh.
think that's when I reached out. I looked up your website on Mind Body Reconnect, and I chose Alice Bowley, and I reached out to her, and she was wonderful in giving me that first free session, just to tell me a bit more about how mind body works, but just a chance for me to tell her what I was going through as well. And I was a bit skeptical, to be honest with you, at the very
Mhm.
beginning. I was like, if mind body worked, and how is not healing so many other people out there who are talking and crying out for help with long
Yeah,
COVID, right? But
yeah,
I thought, let's give it a shot. And you know what? So I looked up the website, like I said, went through recovery stories, and it was a game changer for me. It
yeah.
really helped me to get connected to my inner self, and everything started falling in place after that.
That's wonderful. Yes, because and I must admit, I had the same thinking when I kind of started to, because I worked in conventional medicine, and when I started to understand that the mind body connection was way more important than we ever understood, I was open to trying anything really to recover, because it just ruins your life, doesn't it? And there
Yes,
you are with a young child, and you really want to be there for them and
yes.
work. And I felt the same. I was skeptical because I thought, I don't see how understanding the connection will actually
Mm.
change anything. So what was it for you? What made the difference for you when you started to learn about the mind body connection? What was it that changed everything for you?
Yes, so Alice, like I said, Alice was so good at supporting me throughout this. And as she started sharing more about mind-body connection, I was like, wow, it makes sense. Because we started talking about obviously repressed emotions, for instance. And then it made me realize that as a mom, a wife, and a working woman, I had been feeling so overwhelmed for a few years now by that point,
Mm,
just trying to juggle it all and just make everything look seamless and perfect. Like, I
yeah.
can be a mom, I can be a wife, I can be a working woman, don't worry, I've got this. But deep down, I think I did feel like it was an endless cycle, you know,
Yeah.
and that only, was made worse, when the pandemic hit us.
Mm,
So I went through cycles of emotions during the pandemic, and a lot of time, I think I went through these emotions silently or quietly, as there was too much going on with everyone's lives anyway at that point. And
yeah.
I didn't feel like I should be expressing my emotions, or, so I had it all very much repressed.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think just looking back and just talking through Alice, that's what I figured out. Like, yes, there are a lot of emotions that I wasn't being authentic to.
Yeah, yeah. And isn't that interesting? Because I could understand like physical illness. We've all had some physical illnesses in the past, like COVID, like prior to that, flu, whatever we get along the way. But I'd never, until I came across the mind body community, understood the importance of emotions. I
Mhm,
I was taught it was a weakness to express certain
mhm,
emotions, and that
mhm.
I should be in control of them. And that's the thing, isn't it? I was speaking to someone yesterday, and she was saying, I thought I was Superwoman and I should be able to cope with all of these things and
Yes.
juggle all these balls. And she said, but eventually I realized that I crashed and I couldn't do that.
Yes.
So yeah, so was there a light bulb moment for you? Or I sometimes think it's a string of fairy lights, but was there a light bulb moment for you?
It was a light bulb moment. And then I started realizing how much effect would repressed emotions have for your body? Because obviously it would take its toll if,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not being very authentic to your emotions, you're not being true to your emotions. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
clearly that was a way that my body was saying, it's enough, Shrij. It's enough. Like, connect to it, take an action or take a step,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, do something about it. You can't just repress it and just, let it think that it'll just disappear, because it won't. It just stays within us, unless we're not
Absolutely.
actually um accepting it, or, acknowledging it. So I think, like, in that sense, it was a big light bulb moment, because I realized that it wasn't just, COVID that hit me and then I crashed. It was the years of emotional repression of those
Yeah,
years of repressing those emotions, you
yeah,
know, that
yes.
probably just, yeah, it had to be released through my body somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you were like me. This is kind of a common theme I see coming up because it took me a long time to look at emotions because I thought I'm emotionally smart. I talk about my emotions.
Yeah.
I don't generally bottle them up, only if it's appropriate to do so, I thought. So it just seems such an alien concept that emotions could be the problem. And I
Yes.
think the big thing with this is talking about how you feel isn't enough, is it?
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
you mentioned action. It
Yes.
is about understanding emotions are our body's way of communicating with us, and
Yes.
it's asking for an action about the
Yeah.
situations we find ourselves in. And when the
Yes.
action is the one our emotional body is looking for, then we feel good. And if it's not, then we don't feel good. And that's just how it alerts us, isn't it? So
Yes.
is that what very much came across to you? Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it was a whole journey. It was that, but also the whole journey of trying to actually feel these emotions, just try to understand what sort of emotions they are,
Yeah.
and as we talk about in Mind Body Reconnect, it's about how do we separate the authentic emotions from the brain generated emotions,
Yes. Yeah.
So that was a huge learning curve for me. And to be honest, it took me a while to get there, you
Yeah.
know, because Alice would take me through, stepping stones, through the process of actually, just checking myself in, trying to understand what these emotions are and trying to be curious about it. And that's another thing I learned, curiosity,
Yes.
which I'd
Yeah.
never ever thought about before in my life until then.
Uh-huh.
I was never curious about my emotions, never.
Uh-huh.
So it's all about curiosity and just checking myself in. So doing that every day and trying to practice it every day, then it kind of helped me to understand a bit more about how you separate these two emotions. I mean,
Yeah.
the authentic and the brain generated emotions and what sort of emotions they are and trying to feel it through the sensations in our body. So, it was huge. It was a huge learning
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, cool. Because that's another thing that's different about the Mind Body Reconnect. We understand there are two types of emotions, and in psychology, they're more. It's only fairly recently they've started to think in this way. So we talk about authentic emotions, which are your body's authentic guide, can't lie to us, but
Mhm.
don't speak clearly in words like our
Yes.
thoughts. And
Yes.
then if you haven't find yourself in a situation and we either aren't listening properly or responding appropriately, and we go into overthinking about it, well, there's nothing I can do about this, or if I take an action, it will just make things worse. Then we end up in overthinking. That generates more emotions about the situation, and those emotions we call like brain generated, thought generated emotions, and
Mhm.
they may or they may not tell the truth of the
Mhm.
situation.
Mhm.
But they feel the same. So that's why we tend to need a guide through this. But
Yeah.
do you find that now you know this, that because our what we see our job is to kind of illuminate, to educate, to coach, but ultimately with every person we work with, make ourselves redundant
Mhm.
because we want you to be your own expert in
Mhm.
your own body and your own emotions, so that going forwards you're your own expert, your own therapist. You don't need us. I mean, we're
Mhm.
here if you needed us as a resource ever, but our intention would be that you know so much, you know how to work with your body, so we're not needed. So do you feel you've got to that point that you're able to, are you back to symptom-free health, or you're living a full active life? Maybe you've changed some things, have you, as a result of this?
Absolutely. I think I'm back to, I can say, as 2022 was a complete write-off for me, I was homebound for most of that year, took complete time off work to obviously, and then went through this whole mind body reconnect journey. I could say that 2023 was a year of recovery for me. So
Yeah.
I did implement a lot of those tools and techniques that I learned through Mind Body Reconnect last year. And, I tried to kind of not master it because I don't think we're going to ever master it, but
Yeah.
we could potentially at
Yeah.
some point, but because it's still work in progress, but there were so many instances, or there have been so many instances where I had a lot of opportunity to keep trying to practice it as much as I can. And I think I can say quite happily right now that in this year, in 2024, since the start of this year, I've been back to normal life, full working life. So I work full time. I look after my child. I'm able to go out, do social networking and just be, it's been good to be back at myself, like feel like myself again in
Uh-huh.
2024. But that said, I think what I've learned through Mind Body Reconnect is something that I just can't dismiss because I still use it even now when I'm
Yes.
going through, because we feel emotions every day.
Yes.
So I think it's been huge in that sense that I'm still applying it. I'm still
Yeah.
trying to practice it as much as I can. And I feel like it will be a part of my life now.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful to hear. It's wonderful to hear you're back to symptom-free health. And as you rightly say, this is a way of life, because these circuits in our brain, the emotional brain, are there to guide us and keep us safe. So it always wants us to be practicing listening, practicing trying to respond appropriately. And I've been doing this more than 20 years now myself, and but also helping other people for nearly 20 years. And what I find is I still make mistakes, but
Mhm.
these days I don't sweat that. I just go, oh, that's curious. Oh, that's interesting. What, I missed something there. What's my body trying to tell me?
Yeah.
So whereas before, when I had lots of symptoms, it's like your body tries to find lots of different ways of getting your attention. So the symptoms will keep increasing and
Mhm.
they will evolve. Whereas before, I get a new symptom, go to the doctor, they do tests
Mhm.
and say we can't find anything wrong. I think, really? And I
Yes.
get discouraged and what's going on. Whereas now I go, interesting. It's
Yes.
just my body trying to get my attention. What is it I've missed? And the big thing for me is learning that about, and realizing that the body has three concerns. And one is that we're being treated fairly, appropriately, thoughtfully, kindly. If we're
Mhm.
not, that we set our boundaries, but that we do that constructively so it
Mhm.
doesn't make the situation worse.
Yes.
Also, that we create a life that meets our needs in a balanced variety of ways. And sometimes we get sucked into what's expected of us,
Mhm.
and we expect of ourselves. I'm the mom, I'm the wife. I've
Mhm.
got to do really well at work as well, and I want a social life. And
Mhm.
why not have all of those? But we need to get the balance right.
Yes.
And the other third concern of the emotional brain is that we don't get into that overthinking rut
Mhm.
of kind of going into hopelessness and thinking we can't do anything, and it kind of stalls us from taking constructive actions in our lives.
Mhm.
So those are the principles that guide us. Would you agree that those are principles now that we live by? But it's become a habit. I don't particularly
Mhm.
think about it. Just every
Yes.
now and then, it's like my body gives me a little poke if I've kind of gone off a
Yes.
bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I feel the
Mm,
same, Claire. I've been going
yeah.
through that journey now. Like I said, in 2024, it's by now I'm actually being able to read into my body, listen to my body, and I've also figured out that, what does actually, self-care as well actually
Yeah.
mean. It
Yeah.
makes a lot more sense now. Self-care is actually listening to yourself, listening to your emotions. It's not, just physically reaching out for self-care, like, I don't know, going for a pampering session or something. It's not all that, but it's more so it's giving yourself, allowing yourself that compassion and allowing yourself, that chance to actually go, hey, Shrij, what are you actually feeling? Tell me, So no, it's great in that
That's
sense.
wonderful. That's beautiful advice to be giving out to other people as well in this video. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anything you'd like to say to people who are thinking about doing this, where we used to be? Is there anything you'd like to say to them about this?
Yes, and I think, obviously what I would do is, my only advice would be, if you ever come through Mind Body Reconnect, if you're watching this recovery story right now, I think you should just approach it with an open mind, you know,
Okay.
because it can be a real discovery.
Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
can learn so much about yourself, your emotions, but also you can equip yourselves with tools and techniques which will give you like a lifelong mental and physical well-being, you
Yeah.
know? So it's because we are daily, trying to find a way to respond to stresses and triggers in our lives. But I think this mind body connect can be really, really, really effective in helping us find a way to respond to these, to make sure that we are physically and mentally well.
Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful advice. One final thing, because um, in my experience, it can be challenging, and and often when people post their recovery story, they don't always say it was
Mhm.
difficult at
Mhm.
times. So I think it's important to say that it can be challenging, not always, but also the most amazing thing because it gives you a
Yes.
health back. Would you agree? Would that be something you would agree with?
Absolutely. I mean, I won't lie, it was very,
Mm,
at some point it was very challenging and difficult because as you're going through the symptoms, when you're so unwell, but then at the same time you're trying to practice this mind body reconnect, sometimes it kind of hits and it contradicts. You're like, oh, I don't
yeah,
think it's working for me. You go through that negativity,
yeah,
and so there were countless times when I reached out to Alice and I said, Alice, like I'm feeling this, and I've taken an action, but it's not working. It's not working, and Alice was so good in telling me, Shrij, it's all about being curious and trying to give that safe space and just tell yourself, like, we'll figure this out
yeah,
because, you're not going to find an immediate fix anyway, you
yeah,
know? So you
yeah,
just have to give yourself time to really understand what's going on sometimes. So what I'm saying is, you may feel an emotion, but not necessarily may find a quick fix to it. You may not understand what the emotion is. So
yeah,
what I've learned from this is, it's not about, feeling an emotion, trying, you figure out what emotion that is, and you're taking the action and you're not seeing results. It's not about looking for an immediate quick fix.
mhm,
What we learned through this, or what I learned through this in this journey was it's about how we respond to these things that
yeah,
matters more than actually looking for taking action and where's my quick fix, you know? So
yeah.
giving yourself that time, giving yourself that curiosity.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Shrij. It's so wonderful to meet you. It's a joy to meet you. And thank
Likewise.
you for sharing your recovery story with us. And just to mention, I know you mentioned at the beginning that you had a free 30-minute session with Alice. So we offer that to anybody who wants to get in touch with us because, this is often understanding the mind body connection or even being aware of the mind body connection is not always there for
Mhm.
us because our society doesn't think in those terms at the moment. So we're really happy to offer this 30-minute free consultation. And then if people feel it might be the right thing for them, then really happy to work with people who feel it's the right thing for them. So I'm very glad that you came to us and to see you well and back with your lovely child and back in the world. And we're always here if you need us. But most people don't, but very occasionally people get back in touch with us, and we're always really happy to put people back on their feet because sometimes things happen that the emotional brain doesn't speak clearly in words, and
Yes.
I certainly found about a year in, I something happened which hadn't happened for a long time, and I slipped back into my old way of doing it, and I thought,
Mm.
oh,
Yes.
I knew because I had an increase in symptoms. But if that did happen and you weren't sure why, then we're here. But what we would hope is everybody's got the knowledge of what sorts of things because we're all unique. Our situations are unique, but this
Yes.
mind body connection works in the same way for everyone. It works in the
Yes.
same way. So that's how we're able to help guide. And also, it means once you know this, you don't slip back into symptoms, or if you do it's brief, you go, oh, whoops, what did I miss? And you sort it and then back you come.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
oh,
Absolutely.
oh,
Thank you,
thanks
Claire. No,
again.
it's been wonderful to be here as well. And I hopefully, all of us will be able to help one another.
Thank you. Isn't that an awesome thing? And I do feel that people I work with, it's so obvious that we're all a force for good in this world. And thank you for showing up and being one here to shine a light for others on the fact is you can recover from this.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Claire.
you.